Qublumu qiyu yavi qiyu yavaksin aribi maaya.
This film was going to be a lot of things over the years that it's been quote-unquote in development. It was first just an exploration of what I knew about my Inuk mother, Suvinai, which wasn't a lot, but I did know that she died in a park in Montreal in public on an October morning in 1997. That was enough of a hook in itself. What brought that woman's path to an end in that park, and what forces caused it to intersect with my white New Yorker father's path? But in the middle of finding the details for my story, a part of my mother's path was illuminated for me. She had spent a large part of her teenage life thousands of kilometers from home in a residential school. I couldn't help but investigate the questions that this revelation brought up. My mother's suffering in residential school at least in part led her to an alcoholic life that ended with massive liver failure. But the film project languished. I'm not the person to tell the horrific stories that come from the residential schools. There are still many survivors who have told and will continue to tell those stories firsthand. My story isn't their story. My story is of the next generation, the children of Canada's lost children, and how, in the end, in so many ways, the colonialist government of Canada achieved their aims with the residential school system. The fact that I'm making this film might be evidence enough. I'm a Canadian. I'm Akadlunak. This film is the story of my relationship as a half Inuk man to that woman who went away to residential school and lost so much of what it means to be an Inuk. And because she passed away years before Canada acknowledged what happened, and she didn't get to tell the Prime Minister and the government to suck it for herself, and because she didn't get to lay out for the world the truth about her experience inside the vicious, genocidal machine that we euphemistically call residential school, I have to lay out the legacy it left with me and my family, as a marker to stand meekly where hers would have shouted out loud. But I know in her own way, she would have been proud.
I met Suvinai while I was making the film Nanook Taxi in Iqaluit, then known as Frobisher Bay. And she hung around with me while we were filming, and then when I went back to New York to do the editing, she came down. She went to California with me when we delivered the film. She helped me do the subtitles in LA. Then we moved to Cape Cod, because once I finished the film, I moved to Cape Cod to Wellfleet to write another script. And she liked it there because we were living in the woods, and I had a canoe, and we'd go fishing and clam digging, and it was the kind of life that, it was a small town, so it wasn't really rough on her. She wasn't used to the big city. And then when we found out that she was pregnant with Mosha, we decided that Sue and I should go back to Iqaluit and be with our family while she was pregnant. And then I would get to California, set up my life there, and then meet up with her. So that's what we did. And she went back to live with Appa and Sally and Johnny and that family. I flew back to New York and then flew to Frobisher Bay, and I was there when Mosha was born. And then we moved back to California, to the house that I had rented. And then while we were there, Sue and I became pregnant with Nikkutai. And Sue and I was not happy living in LA because it's a kind of place where you need to drive a car and it's hot all the time, and it's just not, she just didn't like it, and it wasn't her kind of place. By that time we were living in Hollywood near Griffith Park, and all through this period, she would have these fits of anger, and in retrospect, I think it might be because we weren't consuming alcohol very much. I was not a drinker, and I didn't like to let her drink. So I didn't encourage that, and she seemed to go along with that. But then she would have these outbursts of anger, which I wasn't sure if it was alcohol. Now I'm more convinced that it was alcohol withdrawal that she was going through, but I thought it might just be cultural unease and being in an unfamiliar place. So I thought going back up north would be good for her, that she would be in her own community and she would have her relatives and friends. So we drove across the U.S. through the Southwest and up to New York and flew to Iqaluit. But unfortunately, my hopes that Sue and I would feel better and get back into a better life going back up north were completely mistaken. She was happier, but she wound up just going to the bar and drinking herself silly with her friends, and finally she just went off completely. Never came back, never came home. I guess I probably tried to talk to her in the beginning when she first started going to the bar, but it was really obvious really quickly that she wanted that life, and she didn't care about having anything to do with me and the kids, so she just vanished.
I don't know the reason why she would leave us, but maybe she thought she was doing us a favor because she understood that she wasn't well, you know. Or maybe she thought she couldn't handle raising us.
Then Sue and I showed up and told me she was going to go to Cape Dorset. And I said, well, how can I take care of the kids? She said, well, I can take Mosha with me. And Sue and I left and went to Cape Dorset and took Mosha. At that time, somebody came to me and told me that Sue and I was in Cape Dorset and she was being very cruel to my son Mosha. And her relatives were recommending that I get Mosha to come back. So I arranged through Joannesy to have Mosha brought back by somebody who was traveling from Cape Dorset to Iqaluit. And I picked him up at the airport. I guess he was 3 years old, 2. And I remember when I picked him up at the airport, he was kind of stunned. He hardly recognized me, and he was just full of fear, it seemed to me, you know.
I don't have that many memories of my mom. The earliest memory I have, I guess, is when we moved down south and I was 11. She started calling more frequently. and she would usually be drunk, but I didn't really care. I just wanted to talk to her. And she would speak Inuktitut too, which is nice because we didn't hear it. And she would tell me about her birds. And she would tell me never to have sex, like ever, and kind of get mad in like a Inuit kind of way. But it felt like she cared about me, at least on the phone. So all I have are phone calls and her voice.
Hello? Anana. Hanepi Selum Nasi. The reason I'm calling to find out is my little one doing. Nirichaka. Omaviya Selum Nasi, especially my little one. Who's that I hear yelling? My little one? Let me speak to her, huh? Anana here. Be chalatin, no chalatin. Be good to everyone. Be good to everyone. I'll see you soon. Hakulo? Nakok me at chala? I feel better talking to you. I want to say to her, let's see. Bye, Ma. Bye.
Apparently, Subinai had contacted her family and found out what our phone number was in BC. And she called and she wanted to talk to the kids and renew her contact with them. I was encouraged that there was some kind of healing going on, and it seemed to me. And then she came up with the idea that she would like the kids to come visit her in Montreal and spend some time there. And she swore to me that her life was settled and stable, and that this guy Sylvain was a good person, and Nikkutai was really excited about that. Mosha, I think he probably had some less favorable memories of his mother, because he was older when she left, and there was that incident in Cape Dorset where I don't know really what happened, but she was definitely abusing him in some way. So then one morning we got up and Nick had gone to school, and there was a blinking, we had an answering machine. When I played back the message, it was this guy Sylvain crying and talking in kind of garbled English French, and I couldn't really understand what he was saying. The message was so emotional but so garbled that I really couldn't make out the words that he was saying. I didn't have the phone number of the family, but I knew that Lisa worked at the hospital, so I called the hospital and up in Iqaluit, and the woman at the switchboard gave me Lisa's home number, and I called there, and they told me that Subinai had died. I eventually got to talk to Sylvain, and he told me that she had started drinking because her aunt, she had just died, and Subinai heard that, and she had gone drinking. She had started drinking again because of that. But the morning that she died, she just went down to a park near their house in Montreal and sat on the bench, because it was a nice day. And she just passed away sitting on the park bench, and someone found her sitting there. And that's all I know about it. Her body was taken back to Iqaluit and she's buried there in the cemetery. That's all I have to say.
What other people tell me, my dad and other people, is that I have her smile and that I laugh like her, which was really loud. Dad!
I'm pregnant. The baby was actually due 4 days ago, so it's a little bit late, and hopefully at about this time next week I'll have an actual infant in my arms instead of just a really big belly. My partner Mosha is Inuk, so the baby will be too. Our child's grandmother was a victim of residential school and a policy of colonization that was really insidious. I think we will have to work really hard to overcome that in some ways without erasing that history. We want our child to know what happened and why Inuit culture is not as strong as it could be. And it makes our job, Mosha's job perhaps, but also mine, harder to raise a child who understands what it means to be Inuk. So we want to learn from those experiences, from Suvanai's experiences, and have our child learn from them as well. And I hope recognize how strong that she was and how strong a lot of people have had to be.
I can't imagine the trauma that she went through after being taken from her birth family, adopted, taken to a community, and then taken from that community to somewhere to go to residential school. That only makes me believe, I guess that's why she drank as much as she did and left us very early on. I can only imagine all the trauma that her and other kids experienced at those schools.
Mosha growing up without his mother and leaving the Arctic as a young teen does make things different for our family. It makes his personal experience of Inuit culture different and more limited, perhaps. After all, it's hard for him to pass on things to our child if they were not passed on to him. But partly because of his personality, I think, and also maybe having been exposed to his mom as a very young child and having grown up in a very small Arctic community until he was 13, he does have a lot of that sort of Inuktitut worldview, which I think will benefit our child a lot. I think that there are a lot of Inuit values that I could emulate and teach a child, things like respecting the land and sharing with your family. But I also think that there are other values and traits, kind of an Inuktitut worldview or way of being that I don't have. One kind of an example that comes to mind is that a lot of Inuit have a different concept of time or relationship with time than Southerners do. They seem to have the longer view of things, so they're less concerned about the importance of time and less stressed out by minor irritations. A story that kind of illustrates this is about one of Mosha's friends. He came down through Ottawa just briefly. He was living up north and he was on his way to Winnipeg to see family. So he was at our place and he was saying, I got a bus ticket. I'm, from Ottawa to Winnipeg and I'll be there in 7 hours. And Mosha and I were a bit confused by that because 7 hours on the bus would really only get you just past Toronto. And so the guy double-checked and it turns out that, he'd made a mistake. He was actually on the bus for 7 hours plus a full day. And if something like that had happened to me, and I don't think that I'm alone in this, I would have had a fit. And this guy didn't do that at all. He just kind of laughed and said, oh, well, I guess I get there on Wednesday. And I thought that was really impressive. I think that kind of attitude is partly inborn. But I also think that it's something that's partly taught. I don't think, even if you're an Inuk kid, if everyone around you is getting angry because they have to wait in line at the grocery store or mad because the bus is late, how will you learn how to cultivate that kind of patience? So I will need Mosha and a larger community of people to expose my child to that sort of way of thinking.
Not having a mother throughout my life, not having that lead and that example to follow, I've sometimes questioned how I would be as a mother. I know how much it affected me in my life, not having her there. So I wouldn't do that if I chose to be a mother. And I have a lot of great examples and great people in my life that would support me. I just sometimes wish that she could be there too.